Oh, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. I'm Dan Vado. I wrote this book, My Diecast Life. I also own the Art Boutiki, which is why I'm on their YouTube page. I had promised that I would post a video of the reading I did here during the book release party. Sadly, that video audio quality was not great and chose not to use it. As you seem to have walked in on me while I was reading my own book and wearing a lav mic and in alone in the venue, I thought maybe I'd take another chance at reading from this book. My Diecast Life is basically a childhood memoir of mine. It takes place between the ages of 8 and 11 when I discovered Hot Wheels cars. And I found the box of my Hot Wheels cars when my mom passed away a few years ago. And after playing with them for a while, I decided I was going to sell them. And I did sell them, but when I listed them on eBay, rather than just simply say, this is a Mustang, this is a what have you, I decided to write little stories about playing with the cars and the friends that I grew up with. A lot of people commented on those listings that they were coming just to read the stories. So years later, I found a way to string them together and expand upon them and turn them into this book. And so I'm going to read to you from the first chapter, and all the chapters are named after certain cars. So this one is called Custom Barracuda. The year was 1968 or so. My mom was taking me on a trip to a local toy store, a wondrous, glorious, cavernous mecca of toys called Kitty World. We weren't going to get toys, though. Kitty World also sold swimming pool supplies, and my dad had just had an above-ground pool sunk into the ground in our backyard. So my mom, who had now become the primary caretaker of this folly of a swimming hole, was now given the responsibility of maintaining it. That meant buying chemicals and sweeping out the thousands of bugs that decided to breathe their last in our pool. I knew the chances of my getting a new toy were slim, but just walking through Kitty World was an experience that would leave any kid breathless. So I went along gladly and hoped that my mom might take pity on me and maybe reward me for my good behavior. I had once tried the being a brat in the store until my mom bought me something gambit, and that wound up such a memorable and spectacular failure that I learned to never push my mom's limits in that way again. I love toys. What kid didn't? But what I really mean is I loved toys. My favorite toys were the ones I could make my own adventures with. G.I. Joe's, Captain Action, Major Matt Mason. Don't even get me started on Major Matt Mason, which is a space toy line released in the 60s and designed to capitalize on the real-life space race. I could probably write half a book on Major Matt Mason and the barren landscape that I set up in the side yard of my house, where I ripped up something that I thought were weeds to expose the dirt and make it look like a barren moonscape, only to later discover it was something my mom had planted, probably zucchini. I got in big-time trouble and yelled at in 2 languages. It took me a long time to want to eat zucchini again, but this is, of course, the first of what will be many digressions. Anyway, to get to the pool section of Kitty World, you had to walk past one of the larger toy aisles. These guys were not dummies, and of course, my eyes darted around to see what was new. My mom was literally dragging me to the back of the store, mumbling, "No toys. We got to get the chlorine, and a shock, and acid." She sounded like some sort of mad chemist who was going to create a gas creature in our pool that would devour the neighbors, whom, by the way, she swore up and down had killed our dog Lassie. She was so focused, looking at a list in her hand, that she let go of mine and let me wander freely through the giant aisle. My eyes started to dart around, losing track of my mom and looking at all the new toys that had just gone into the shelves. G.I. Joes, Barbies, Green Army Men, Chatty Cathys, Outer Space Men. I had gotten blissfully lost in the mall, thinking about the terrains and stories I could have with any of these toys in the now barren side yard, except for Barbie because, well, Barbie. I'm not sure how long I wandered through the aisle, but it seemed like my mom had materialized from the back with a shopping cart filled with pool chemicals, nets, plastic hoses, and some giant brushes. Not a toy in the bunch. "Come on, we gotta go get the pool. The pool is green, and your father want me to cook steak for some American friends." By now, you have noticed a specific speech pattern coming from my mom. So this is where I tell you that I am a first-generation American. My parents were both immigrants, coming here separately from Italy a few years after the end of World War II. My first language was Italian, and that's what we spoke at home as far back as I could remember. Then one of my parents' immigrant friends, who also had a kid trying to learn English, told them that they needed to start speaking in English around the house or I was going to be at a disadvantage when I got to school. So overnight, my parents went all in. They spoke English to me, made me answer in English, and even told their friends they had to do the same around me. The plan was solid. Get me ready for school so I could talk to teachers and be conversational with the other kids. In reality, the plan had flaws. It was like learning to play the piano from someone who doesn't have fingers. You might be able to play something, but it's not going to sound right. I found the most helpful thing at the time was watching TV and later translating soap operas from my grandmother, who absolutely refused to speak English. Anyway, back at the toy aisle, I was standing in front of something I had never seen before, a display of die-cast metal cars called Hot Wheels. They were cool, all muscle car looking and sleek, basically a 1/64th scale piece of something resembling freedom. I had a car in my hand, a custom Barracuda. My eyes were wide. Though this thing was still in the package, I still had already mentally placed myself in the driver's seat of this sporty-looking car with red lines on the tires. The red lines, I later learned, were a big deal as they indicated that these came from the first 10 or so years of Hot Wheels production. Red line cars were highly prized by collectors. I was still gazing at this car when my mom snatched it out of my hand and tossed it in the cart. It was amazing because I hadn't even asked for it. That's when I noticed the extended packages of orange track that were stacked below the car display. "We need this too," I said, being ballsy and going for broke. "The car won't work without the track," I said, figuring that if I believed it, so would she. Without hesitation, my mom grabbed the box of track and tossed it in the cart. This was easy. Too easy, I thought. I filed the strategy away for future use. We got home, and while my mom went straight to the backyard to mess with the pool, I went to the front room, which is what we call a rarely used living room with a hardwood floor and a mishmash of semi-antique furniture that my Elsa had cast aside. I examined the box of track to figure out how to set it up. I didn't know about creating a ramp yet and just laid it out flat, so it created an orange expressway between the couch and a recliner. I took the Barracuda out of its package, put it at one end of the track, and gave it a push. I added a sound effect as it rolled to the other end of the track, seemingly on its own power. Zoom. Barracuda got to the end of the track, hopped off, and continued in a straight line until it hit the front door, and in that moment I was transformed. The sight of how easily this car glided along its track, the determined way it rolled off the track and kept going, stopping only until it hit a wall, was like nothing I'd ever seen before. This car was no mere toy. It was all the possible futures I might have. A car, a boss car, one that almost drove itself. I heard my mom stirring in the kitchen, having finished whatever swimming pool alchemy she had been working on. "Company coming. Pick this up, put it away," she commanded. Having learned the hard way what could happen if my toys were out when company came over, I snapped to it and hustled my newfound favorite toy ever into my room, planning my next move to get more cars and more track. Monday rolled around and I decided I was going to show off this new coolest thing ever made to my friends. I grabbed the Barracuda and stuffed it in my pocket, figuring I would show it off at lunch to my friends, who would always marvel at the food I brought to school because it was filled with cured meats and delicacies that they would never see in their own homes. A salami sandwich was nothing compared to a nicely made mortadella and mozzarella sandwich with oil, vinegar, and tomatoes. My mom worked in an Italian market. Well, it was a market in an Italian neighborhood, so my lunches looked like they came from the best restaurant in the city. Growing up, I took prosciutto and melon for granted and was stunned how much of a delicacy it seemed like to my friends. So lunchtime comes around and my friends gathered around me to see what I had in my bag, sizing me up for a possible trade. Moore Park Elementary School had a time-honored lunch swap tradition where kids traded lunches just to escape the monotony of eating the same thing every day. Everyone knew that there was no way I was trading my capicola and ricotta sandwich with lettuce, tomato, and an olive oil drizzle for a PB&J. I once tried trading just to make friends, but I immediately regretted it, and I never did it again. So to get their minds off my sandwich, I pulled the Barracuda out of my pocket. "Look at what I got on Saturday." "Hey, Hot Wheels," interrupted my friend Michael, a big kid who was sometimes my best friend. "Nice, a Barracuda." I was a little surprised. I thought I had discovered this all on my own, but soon found out that I was the one who was late to the party, as people gathered around to talk about the cars they owned and which ones they might drive one day. themselves, and also how Hot Wheels were way better than that Matchbox cars. This one really moved down the track I set up. I didn't even get a chance to finish my sentence when a noticeable murmur swept over my friends. Track? Michael asked. You have track? Yeah, my mom bought it for me when... Your mom bought you track and she let you set it up? Yeah. Why? My mom wouldn't let me set up the track in our house because she said it would ruin the floor. I could see my mom saying the same thing, but she was more obsessed with the swimming pool that day and perhaps didn't think the normal mom thoughts when I started playing with a diecast car in the living room. The bell sounded signaling the end of lunchtime, and as we walked back to class, someone asked, Hey, can I come run my cars on your track sometime? Now, I did not have a ton of close friends other than Michael in school at that time, and they were all, for one reason or another, a little afraid of my mom. Yeah, maybe you guys could come over on Sunday after church and I could get my mom to make us some snacks. I cannot stress enough that regardless of whatever fear my friends had for my mom, they had a healthy respect for what that woman could do with a snack tray. So of course they were all excited to come to my house on a Sunday and race their cars. And thus was born what I would call the Maywood Avenue Sunday Race Car Derby and Lunch Jamboree. Now all I had to do was get my mom to buy me more track, more cars, and make lunch. So there you have it. My Diecast Life. It's filled with stories like that. $12.95 on Amazon. Probably not in any bookstores that you know of, but slgpubs.com, danvado.com, artboutiki.com. And if you buy the book, please leave me a review or give me an idea of whether you liked it or not so I know whether to try to do it again. All right. Good talking to you guys. We will see you around.